The Nebraska Cornhuskers won a major recruiting battle for four-star, most likely offensive tackle Grant Brix out of Iowa, which answers a couple of questions positively about the future of this team under Matt Rhule, such as will Coach Rhule be able to get top recruits at the most important positions even without reaching a bowl game, and simultaneously while losing ugly games to the specific teams that are also recruiting them. Hit that like button for us. Tell us if you know anything about Grant Brix and what you think about his commitment to Nebraska. Gary, it's always exciting to get recruits with 4 or 5 stars. It's obviously really cool to get somebody who's also being offered by teams like Alabama, Kansas State, Oklahoma, and Auburn, just to name a few. How important do you think that this specific commitment is to Nebraska, or do you think it's being overblown?
I think a lot of people are going to overblow it the same way I talk about, or we talk about whatever, other recruits where they see a rating, you see a few clips, which are obviously highlights, the best plays, and they get excited about the individual guy. I've said my piece about it before. I don't get too hyped up about that. I mean, the competition they're playing against now compared to what they're going to play against is drastically different. But overall, collectively, when you look at what Matt Rhule and his staff are doing on the recruiting side, I think it's huge. I think it's bigger than any game we played this year. I think it's the biggest thing that we've seen or that we're seeing happen since Rhule and his staff have come into play. I think it's bigger than the defensive turnaround, the minimizing of penalties, some of the guys on the offensive line or different positions we've seen improve. I feel like a lot of people are judging Rhule and his staff after one season on the collective body of work of Frost and his staff over his tenure here, if that makes sense. And I understand that as fans, bottom line is results and wins and records and bowl appearances and things like that. But he brought in some guys before the season started last year. Some hit, some, at least as far as this season went, missed. And that's going to happen. You're going to have highly touted recruits that aren't going to pan out. You're going to have guys that you barely hear of that blow up. That's across the board. Every big name school, every little school, things like that. That's just what happens. But this is finally putting us in the same ballpark as these teams that you hit it square on the head. The teams that keep beating us, both on the field and on the recruiting trail. And already since he's been here, he kept Malachi from going to Colorado or Michigan or any of those other schools. He got Nelson Carter to stay here when Bama and other schools like that, another number one recruit out of this state, he kept here. Now he's the number one recruit. Brix, we're talking about number one recruit out of Iowa. He took him from Iowa State, Penn State, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Bama was after him for a while, Oklahoma, all these teams that have beat us for years, both in recruiting and on the field. Again, as fans, we care about the records and we care about the wins and the losses. And that's 100% fair. I'm the same way. I care too. But the big picture is at some point it comes down to Jimmy's and Joe's, right? So you can't constantly expect your program to rise up to this level where you're competing with these bigger name schools and you're not getting the base quality of talent that they're able to get. And I feel like he's drastically closed that gap of what he's bringing in. And it's just going to take some time to develop these players and get them in there. But I mentioned Malachi, number one out of the state last year. Carter Nelson, number one out of state this year. Now he's number one out of Iowa this year. We've got some higher end from different states also coming this year. And there's a handful of guys, especially when you go to that offensive line, like we talk about the schools that have what they have at the offensive line and we just can't compete with that, or people feel a certain type of way with Raiola. Raiola had a big impact on this. He's a huge influence on bringing him in, and most people would agree, even though it wasn't great, there was a big improvement on the offensive line this year with what was already here. So, like Corcoran was a big, highly touted recruit, and people have their different feelings and opinions on him. But like I said, not every high recruit is going to pan out. But the more high-end recruits you get, the more likelihood of them panning out you're going to get. So I think that aspect of it is a huge win. I don't think, oh, he does this in this technique and this and that. Like, that's all going to go by the wayside as they put weight on him and they work on his technique and see what he has, where he excels, what he doesn't, what he needs to improve on. Those things, especially in the offensive line position, it's way more technical and advanced, especially from a mental aspect than most people realize when it just looks like bodies slamming into each other. So the idea or the whole big picture of this recruiting thing coming together over the last 2 years, and we haven't even gotten to the portal yet, is to me, a huge step in the right direction in a faster amount of time, shorter amount of time than I anticipated would be. And I think if we can just be patient over the next couple seasons, things will continually get better, but eventually you'll see it really get back to that level people want, because you're just going to have a lot better talent to be working with and trying to develop than we're used to seeing over the last few years. It's a lot easier to hit on skill positions just because there's so many, and you can just take a stud athlete and you look at from defensive back to maybe even middle linebacker, some defensive end, and then you got receivers and running back. There's so many positions where you can take guys that are track stars, athletes, just freak of nature, and put them in there, and you need them when you need them, right? When you dial up a play for them. It's very hard to find an interior defensive lineman or offensive lineman that you have to rely on every single play, and they have to be technically sound, they have to be mentally sound, they have to be very comfortable in understanding real quick on the fly what the guy next to him's doing, what the guy in front of him's doing. It's just a different ballgame, man. But like I said, this is just huge for the coaching staff. It's a huge win for the program in the long term, more so than it is about a guy, getting one guy.
I'm just super excited to be winning a recruiting battle against teams that recently have beat us, like Iowa, to go into Iowa and get their best recruit to come to Nebraska. It almost makes it okay. Tell us what you guys think in the comments. We'll see y'all soon with another video. Until then, go Big Red.